I am Dr. Joanna Weaver. I am the AYA Integrated Language Arts Content Coordinator at Bowling Green State University. I am also a co-director of the Project Impact Grant, which is sponsoring this winter conference. And as a co-director, this is a huge federal grant that we've received. And so with this grant, we've had a lot of opportunities to provide professional development for teachers and teacher candidates. We've created some really amazing partnerships with the surrounding schools and been able to work with them, again, with our teacher candidates, but really helping each other out with different services. And we've just been blessed with a lot of opportunities. Even we have a Project Impact student group now, which is a really powerful group of students who are creating opportunities for professional development, attending these type of conferences, the winter conference. And I'm just very thankful to be a part of it. And as I said, if it weren't for that grant, we wouldn't have this winter conference right now. Dr. Bertelsen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. I'm Dr. Cynthia Bertelsen, and I am a colleague of Dr. Weaver's. She and I both teach in the graduate reading program, and I currently serve as the graduate reading coordinator. But I'm also a research collaborator with Dr. Weaver, and so some of the work that we're going to share with you today is an outgrowth of some of that research that we've been doing for the last 2 to 5 years. And then I'm also quite fortunate to be working in another capacity with Dr. Weaver as part of the Project Impact literacy team. And that's where we've been working on some curriculum as well. And so we're kind of pulling a lot of our research and teaching interests together. And you will be able to participate with us within this presentation.
Absolutely. And this one, any of you who were in my previous presentation, it was all about reflective practice. Well, that one was about lesson study and reflective practice and SOAP and MAP notes. And this one is reflective practice promotes social justice, which literally ties directly into my last presentation, because we were talking about hidden figures with Jennifer Fong, because we did lesson study with Jennifer's class. And using the book Hidden Figures, we're able to address social justice issues. Now, this presentation is not about hidden figures per se. It's about our teacher candidates engaging in social justice and reflecting on it through the use of SOAP notes. So hopefully that makes sense. So Dr. Bertelsen, you want to talk about the SOAP notes?
Yes, SOAP notes is really a framework that we use to organize teachers' record keeping, their thinking, their actions, and their thoughts about what occurred during a lesson, what they need to do as they are preparing lessons, and then answering that question, the so what. And so our work around SOAP notes has really focused and has been modified by work by Manny and Manny, as well as Schoen's work when it comes to reflective practice. And we are actually looking at reflection in action, reflection on action, as well as reflection for action. And SOAP notes really then is a practice that has been grounded in the medical field and is really finding its way now in the educational field. So the purpose of SOAP notes really is for a teacher to be able to compile relevant information about the actual lesson, how students are progressing through that lesson in curriculum or content. It also helps teachers identify obstacles or challenges within that lesson. It helps to improve communication, not only internally with that teacher when it comes to reflective practice, but also to communicate and work on that relation building between teacher and students, as well as provides a structure for developing the plans and then also working to assist students in achieving and succeeding in school, but also to help in a professional development manner for the classroom teachers. Next slide. Thank you. And so what we have done and what we have asked our teacher candidates to do is to use this particular template. It's the SOAP template, where there are 4 main features: the S, the O, the A, and the P. The S is the subjective notes, and this is where the teacher will write observational notes or anecdotal notes based on the classroom, if it's a large group or if it's a small group or individual. The teacher will be writing notes regarding student demeanor, attitude, interaction, and level of engagement. The O is observational notes, and this is where the teacher will again continue to write some anecdotal notes or some things to think about or questions or something that was not anticipated, so that the teacher can move forward in looking more deeply at some areas during the lesson. The A is where the teacher will identify the different results of assessments. These assessments can either be a pre-assessment data, it could be progress monitoring data, it could be summative or formative, but any type of assessment measure that is used during the lesson. And this is where the teacher will record some results. And the P is for planning, that's the future lesson. This is where the teacher is actually answering the question, so what? What does this mean for me as a teacher moving forward in my planning? And so what does this mean regarding what my students need next? Where do I need to step back, rethink? Or do I need to move forward? Am I moving too fast? Am I moving too slow? Have I anticipated too much or not enough? And so that's where the teacher is going to actually be identifying steps in the planning process. We have then added 2 additional areas: the challenges and the future learning around the work that we've done. And the challenges, again, is really looking at what kinds of things did I, as the teacher in this lesson, maybe not anticipate? What kinds of difficulties or struggles did I notice the students possibly having through small group, large group instruction? Or if I did do a whole class lesson, should the next time or the struggle, should I be moving into a different grouping option to make sure that the students are thriving and succeeding? And then also the last area is future learning. These are some areas where the teacher can challenge themselves to look at the content differently, ways in which the teacher can incorporate different kinds of technology or different devices or different methods that would really help to deepen students' learning as well as engage in their learning. And these 2 slides are really a closer than view of the actual plan that we asked our students to complete.
As I looked at those, I was like, whoa, and there it is, really close up.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to stop there for a second, and I'm going to stop sharing for 2 seconds. Do we have any questions at this moment about SOAP notes and what they are? Can you see the advantage to, or what are some of the advantages to using SOAP notes? And you can put this in the chat, or there are just a few of us, so we can even talk out loud. What are the advantages or benefits to using SOAP notes through instruction? I
can jump in there, Dr. Weaver, because I've been doing them for our and I've just made a regular practice now of doing them, particularly when I start a new unit. I like to see what's happening with that. That's really a good time for me to use them. But one of the benefits is you pick up on the patterns of particular kids. So when you make those observations in that section, and you can just see they're clear as a day patterns with certain kids. And then when you see those patterns, that planning section allows you to then really sort of hyper focus on what am I going to do, even if it's just for one particular kid or a small group of kids. And it can illuminate things I've picked up on kids that might be having something going on at home. So it's more of a personal thing that I can refer them to the guidance counselor for, or I can see that it's something in my lesson that they're just not grasping.
That's wonderful. What about the rest of you? And maybe you haven't used them yet, but do you see any advantages or benefits? And if teacher candidates, let's think about kind of your future or when you're going to be entering the classroom soon. Do you see some benefits to the SOAP notes, and what do you see?
I wrote it in the chat, but I said, correct me if I'm wrong, but we use them when we're student teaching, right? I feel like I remember seeing that in your syllabus. Okay, cool. So for me personally, I think like using that, it can help me see like where I need to work more or get more guidance, as well as like what I'm doing well. And I can also keep track of like my students and how they're reacting to me and my lessons.
Absolutely. So that way you're looking at as a self-reflection, like what can I do better? What do I need to change? What more do I need to learn? But you're also looking at student learning and their engagement, their mindset. So it's layered, definitely layered. Let's see, Sarah Ramirez, thank you for what you wrote, that you're a longtime counselor, and thank you for noticing. I just jumped it. It just jumped. Thank you for noticing you should sometimes refer students. These were medical. This started in the medical field. And I think that's almost the beauty of it. I mean, my daughter still uses them. She's in PharmD at the University of Toledo right now, and they use them daily. She just had to write 4 SOAP notes last week. And part of that's referrals. Some of that is patient relationship. It is diagnoses. It's all, obviously medicinal as well, but sharing these notes with the other professionals in the building and referring to the school counselor. Yes, that is absolutely one of the critical pieces that it can be used for. So educationally, it really parallels what they do, in the medical field as well. I love, Sarah, I always refer students. Our counselor is probably sick of me. Okay, that was your response. I don't think they would ever be sick of you. Okay, so now we're going to go to the next section. The next section is, okay, social justice. How did we actually use these SOAP notes to help our teacher candidates reflect on their instruction of implementing social justice? That was a really long title of what we are doing. Anyway, that's not even the word I wanted to use. That's all right. All right, here we are. So let me ask you, what is social justice? What do you think social justice is? I guess I could go back to not sharing again. So I can see your beautiful faces. What is social justice? What do you think? What are your ideas about social justice? What do you think it might be? There are no wrong answers, so you can put it in the chat or you can talk out loud, however you want. Let's see, I've got to scroll down. Equitable learning environments, all students having access and a voice in my classroom. Love it, absolutely. Anything else?
I always add critical reflection to my definition when I'm working in social justice. So not just like, how can I create space that is equitable and inclusive and inviting, but also reflecting on like my own privileges that I have and my identities and how that impacts the space that I'm trying to create.
You literally just made the hairs of my arm stand up. Thank you for contributing that, because I think that's so important, that we have to be self-reflective of our own privileges and our own place in this world. in our biases. That's so important. And if consequences are necessary, they are logical to the infraction. Sarah, do you want to go into that a little bit more?
Sorry, I can't have my video on.
No, you're okay. You're okay.
I think a lot of times in schools, a student does something and the teacher just wants them out of the classroom and sends them to the office, and then the office is supposed to deal with it. But I think with social justice, it's more than just, hey, you're getting suspended or you're staying in a detention. You have to spend the time, speaking with the student so they understand what they did. And then if a consequence is necessary, it's either reparations or something, instead of a slap on the wrist that does not teach them anything about why they did it was wrong, and that there are natural consequences that do come from behaviors.
Absolutely. And I'm going to give you an example from the news last night, which was horrifying. And I'm just going to say it. There was on the news last night, how schools are going back to wearing masks and all this. There was a parent who was very against, right? Trinity, did you see it? Okay. So there was a parent who was totally against, I think she had a daughter, I don't know, her kids wearing masks to school, and they start on Monday. And she said that her student will be coming to school on Monday without a mask, and she will have her guns and artillery loaded to shoot down anyone who doesn't let her daughter in the school. Now, this is where I have, well, that's a huge issue, but the reaction was not to arrest her for threatening to shoot everybody. It was looked past. If that person, if that mother had been a mother of color, she would have been arrested immediately. No doubt. And they said she's under investigation. And that was their response. That was huge to me. That was an example that blew my mind. So what the things we're talking about right now are very much social justice education. So what we were having our students do, take this social justice education mindset, but implementing social justice issues into the classroom for the students to respond to. So let me show you what we did. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
So in terms of what is social justice, justice in terms of distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within a society, dignity, respect, humanity in every person, which ties exactly into what we are all discussing, even in terms of consequences in infractions. What is the whole story behind our students when they are having issues in the classroom, checking our privileges and in being self-reflective of our own privileges, of where we are, who we are, our own biases. And all of these pieces all are encompassing within social justice. So what we're going to do, these were, I'm going to see if I can move our faces down to the bottom of the screen. There we go. All right, so these are all pseudonyms, but were different teacher candidates' responses in their SOAP notes. And what we want you to do going back, and I don't know if I can go back. Nope, I just went forward. How do I go back? This is an interesting conundrum. Oh, there we go. Hold on. So slideshow. We'll see what happens. What? Hold on. This is what I always do, and it throws me off because I don't want to go back to the beginning, but I guess I have to, and then I'll just scroll through because that throws me off. Okay, so the students seem to have a good background on slavery and racism, and the stations really help them connect this knowledge. They use Pear Deck. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Pear Deck. Connect this knowledge to the 1930s society. Many students quickly picked up on the fact that segregation was separate but not equal. Okay, so if we are to look at social justice, where does that fit in terms of how they connected students to social justice? What area does that fit into? So let me go down one more. Let me go down again. There we go. Do you understand the question I'm asking? Here's the definition. Oops. Do you see where this fits into the definition of social justice, or how, is someone tell me how it fits into the issues of social justice? What do you think? As I was looking at this, I thought, okay, the students seem to have a good background. So clearly there was some sort of pre-survey or pre-assessment to understand whether or not what the background the students had, what their knowledge base was on slavery and racism, right? Because they said they had a good background on slavery and racism. And so they were very conscientious about making sure that they had a solid background before going forward with the rest of the discussion. And it helped them connect this knowledge, their background knowledge, on the 1930s society. Okay, so first of all, as I look through this, I'm like, all right, obviously the topic is slavery and racism. They wanted to check their background to make sure they had a solid background or fill in the blanks for them on slavery and racism, and then connect this knowledge to the 1930s society. All right, so then it looks like to me that they had the students do some research on the 1930s and what was happening regarding slavery and racism during the 1930s. So they're making the connection between their background knowledge of what they think of racism, or think what racism is, and where slavery was, you know, and how it fit in based on their background knowledge. Then they connected it to the 1930s and what was actually happening by the students doing some research on it and making that connection. Then many students quickly picked up on the fact that segregation was separate but not equal. Jennifer, you're really nodding your head a lot.
I see what you're seeing. I love the fact, I mean, as an English teacher, I love the fact that I'm assuming there were some kind of texts involved somewhere in this, whether they're digital or whatever. But I love the fact that they're taking that background knowledge, which is so important, and connecting it, as you said, to the knowledge that they're learning about the 1930s. But they're also not just connecting that knowledge from one thing to another, but they're picking up on the big ideas of the research that they must have been doing. So they're digging deeper, they're thinking critically about what they're learning too, because that's a huge, you know, we talk about this idea separate but equal and segregation when I do teach the book Hidden Figures and many other pieces of literature that we look at. And it's so important for them to get those really large, big, broad ideas, and that they're still happening. I mean, I see this connection too as, wow, we're talking about slavery and racism, which people typically think about with the Civil War, at least in United States history. But look, now we're learning about the 1930s and it's still there. And if they continue down that track, they'll eventually realize that it's still an issue, obviously.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what we hope after this is that discussion continues and that you go down that trajectory, go down the history and see how it has shifted, changed, or remained the same, you know, depending. So no, I love that. Okay, let's go on to the next one. And I wanted to do a little bit of a think aloud. I wanted to give you some time to kind of think through what that quote meant to you. And you're like, okay, let's grapple with this a little bit before I jumped in and said, okay, let's do a think aloud and walk ourselves through this. Here's another one. After reading, I asked students comprehension, if I could read out loud, that would be really helpful. I asked students comprehension questions about the setting, characters, and some possible themes that might pop up in I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. The students had a clear understanding of the setting and the plot so far. I also asked them if we see any groups like the KKK in our society today. The students seem to have a better grasp of possible themes today than the group of students that I had yesterday. Interesting. The background knowledge shifted, same class, different group of students. All right. I'm just going to give you like 30 seconds to think through, again, going back to the ideas of social justice and connecting the students to the social justice issues. What do you see? What are some of your ideas?
I think I'm kind of stuck on that last sentence, that the students had a better grasp today than they did yesterday. And it has me kind of asking the question, like, did the STEM questions among groups of friends and they were talking about it outside of class and they're coming into class with a little background knowledge or having put thought into it? Or if it was just pure luck that one class was more interested or knew more than the other.
I love that. So, yeah, I kind of wondered that too. It's like, did they talk to each other so that they were more ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Somebody else.
I think I was thinking like Christine, for me, it's that there seems to be a gap between, I want to know what that particular teacher did between asking about the groups, you know, were there any groups like the KKK, you know, did the students research it? Did they read another text? Did she ask more questions? As Christine said, did they talk about it outside of class as students? What got them to having that better grasp of possible themes today based on that question?
Let me ask you a question. Do you think possibly it had to do with the SOAP notes reflection from yesterday to today?
Oh, absolutely.
Why do you say that?
Well, I think this particular teacher is just, you can see the train of thought there that he or she is they're reflecting on what happened yesterday, again, maybe with this particular question about the KKK, and now seeing that the students have a better grasp of theme than they had the day before. So you can see the connection from
One day to,
yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there is a possibility that this teacher reflected on yesterday's SOAP notes and said, I need to change something because they didn't get it today.
yes.
And
yes.
so the reflective practice, the SOAP notes actually strengthened their instructional practice because today they're getting it better. Go ahead, Christine.
Sorry, it could have been as simple as rephrasing the question to the class. I mean, something so basic that he or she learned from in the SOAP notes.
Because of intentional reflection.
Yes.
You know, because they did the SOAP notes very intentionally, based on this topic. And that quickly changed their instruction and rephrased or did whatever they needed, to change it so that the students really made stronger connections. That was really powerful to me, that you could see the change within 24 hours. So let's look at another one. Let's see, uses a text Night by Ellie Wissel that could teach social justice and had students participate in discussion, discussing morality, especially in the times of Nazi Germany. Students struggle with gray areas of morality in discussion. We're trying to unpack why good people do bad things when desperate. Think about social justice. Thoughts?
I just keep wanting to see the rest of the soap notes.
Right?
It's like a cliffhanger for me in a book. I want to, like, that book is perfect for social justice. And then when this particular teacher wrote about the struggle with gray areas of morality and discussion. So my brain is like, ooh, I want to know what they did.
What did you do next?
Right. What'd you do next to get them to get the
Yeah, 'cause
students to unpack that?
Yes, because this was clearly a challenge.
Yeah. So
And
I know that didn't address your social justice question, but
No, but I am the same. I was just like, give me more, give me more. I want to know
Yep.
what's next. But I think morality falls right into social justice. And the ideas of morality fall right into social justice, and why good people do bad things. I mean, that definitely, and I think a lot of the responses within the social justice reflections were very superficial. And so it's like to go back and say, okay, how did you address this? Were you able to go deeper? But I think, and Jen, this kind of takes me back to your presentation of the more you do reflective practice, the deeper the more critical thinking you do. So it's always important to do 2 or 3 weeks, so it becomes automatic, and you start seeing, just like you're doing yourself, where you're using the notes frequently and using those SOAP notes regularly, because it's an intentional reflection. Yeah, it takes, a couple extra minutes at the end of your day to reflect and do it, but wow, the power behind it. And even that last one shows how quickly that intentional reflection impacts instruction.
Well, and I think as an English teacher here, right, they're looking at age-old questions. So again, you're not just looking at the characters or how the setting or plot might affect the characters, but you're really getting at those essential questions, because that would be a great essential question to carry throughout this book, and then perhaps some side texts that they're reading with this book.
Absolutely, to have those supplemental texts would be so powerful here. And I love how you said that it's not just about the setting, it's not just about the characters, it's about the bigger theme, and what the author is saying with that bigger theme, and getting the students to really dig in, drill down, and unpack that, and the idea of morality, and how does that connect to today. That could go in so many different directions,
Right.
with how the parallels, and as well as the conflicts with today's morale, both. So that's super powerful. I want to look at the time because I don't want to go over time. So we have about 10 minutes. This is a bigger one. I observed students learning by watching and listening to their responses to the prompts. We also engaged in a discussion after the activity was complete on if their viewpoints changed and how other characters may have reacted to Janie if they knew what she was going through. Many of the students changed their opinions about whether to sit next to a specific person or not. Some students demonstrated that they did not have any change in opinion. Then I gave them time to think about and discuss why they made the choices that they did. The students gave me positive feedback and were interested in how their biases had changed. I think the next one goes on. The students seemed sluggish and tired. Sounds like that mindset, you know, right at the top, that subjective piece that we always talk. I kept hearing from the same few students, no matter how hard I tried to get others to participate. The students who did respond, either in the chat or thought their microphones, I don't know what that was supposed to, responded with higher level thinking. They accomplished this by taking into consideration their own personal thoughts about what Langston Hughes was trying to discuss in his poetry, as well as the politics and climate of the 1920s and 30s. I observed student learning by listening to the responses of my students that spoke, that spoke or chose to respond in the chat. The students that did respond were able to think about the material in terms of their own ways of thinking, as well as in a historical context when we considered how the individual in the writing and how African-American workers were treated before the civil rights movement. So that was huge. And that's a very, her soap notes went on for pages and pages, by the way. But I think, again, the morality piece is in there. She's talking about, you know, even with Rosa Parks and sitting with someone on the bus, you know, are you going to sit next to that person or are you not? What is influencing and impacting your choice? Oh, it wouldn't matter to me. Well, when push comes to shove and you look at society and how society's pressure can influence your choices, even though you know your choice could be wrong. You know, so there's a lot of different pieces here that you can go with in talking about Langston Hughes. What do you see standing out to you? This was a big one.
The first thing that caught my eye was that she was having trouble having some of them respond. And so she kept saying, I observed student learning from the students who chose to answer or respond. And so it leaves me questioning, what about the rest?
Excellent, Christine. Yeah, what about the rest? How do you elicit their responses? And why weren't they responding? You know, were they uncomfortable? Did they possibly feel it wasn't a safe place to share their, maybe they disagreed with what the others were saying? Go ahead, Christine.
Well, or I was thinking, were they actually responding in the small groups? And maybe she could have observed there if they were more willing to share in smaller groups.
Yeah, so changing the instructional structure. You know, maybe the large group wasn't the place to share. Maybe she needed the smaller groups so that they felt more free to share.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder too, it sounds like from the line, the students who did respond either in the chat or I think she means through their their microphones. This would be a tough text to discuss if you're teaching virtually over Zoom or Google Meets or whatever.
Why do you say that?
Again, as you said, maybe they're not, it might be better in person. Maybe they weren't comfortable discussing those things in a virtual format, which doesn't always build the community you need to build to have these sorts of discussions.
Absolutely. Absolutely makes sense. So we only have about 6 minutes left. So we definitely looked at the different ways the teacher candidates engage students in social justice. But my question to you is, how will you engage your students in social justice? So what I want to do now, we have, let me just ask that question first. How will you engage your students in social justice? I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, maybe if it lets me. How do you think you can engage your students in social justice? Oh, Sarah said over here, by doing these notes, you can help students to focus on main points, which gets their juices flowing. Good people often do bad things, and this is something interesting in human nature. How does one balance their own family needs with those of others when they conflict? Oh my gosh, that's a major essential question, a beautiful essential question that could be asked. Absolutely. I love that. How else do you think you could engage your students what other ways can we engage our students in these issues of social justice?
So I'm a little different here because I'm a Spanish teacher, but my first thought is the obvious. My students starting Spanish 1 and they say, why do I need to learn another language? Can't the whole world just speak English? And so that's like my essential fight every year of, why do you think English is better than every other language? Why should everyone, kind of like mold to become like us? Why are we not trying to better ourselves? So that's one big fight that we have every year.
No, that absolutely. And I remember even when my kids were growing up, they had the same questions. They're like, everybody knows English, so why don't we just speak English? It's like, and they all learned French, but they were just like, yeah, we're taking it, but everybody speaks. We went to France and they all wanted us to speak English so they could practice their English. They're like, so what was the point in us learning French?
Yes.
But it's true. It's like it's that elitist syndrome, that somehow English is better than the rest. No, I appreciate you saying that. What else? I think those examples of using night and using any Holocaust literature, To Kill a Mockingbird, as well as any historical texts, allow us to address issues of social justice and connect us with where are we now and what has happened in the last 2 years, where these issues have occurred again and again and again and again, and what do we do to be an activist, to stop, even if it's stop here at home and build it out, what role do we take? But I think also using SOAP notes allows us an opportunity to really think about our own practice. And as Bernie said in the beginning, checking our biases at the door, looking at our own privilege and how does our own privilege, how is it impacting our instruction? For good or for bad, because we may be implicit in pushing forward some of these issues because we're not checking our own biases, we're not checking our own privileges and forgetting, and I won't even say forgetting because it's our responsibility to not forget our own privilege and to being able to be more inclusive. And I think the SOAP notes are a beautiful opportunity for us to be self-reflective and address those struggles because, students are getting all sorts of messages all over from, and not that ours is the end all be all as their teacher, but making sure they're open-minded. Are we allowing them opportunities to look at issues from all different angles, from all different perspectives? Christine, you said, I love the idea of SOAP notes, but can see how they would be time consuming to fill out daily. I'm wondering if this could become something that we do naturally or internally without actually writing it down. I think so. I think so. Now, what I have my students do is they just choose one class a day. They don't do it on all the classes. They choose one class a day and they make the notes out for whatever class they choose, because that can somewhat be representative of the entire, of their other classes as well. But it also creates a natural, like you were saying, internal reflection. Now, Jennifer, I'm going to point this right at you because I know you use these, I know you use SOAP notes. So can you answer, Christine, because you write them every day?
I do write them every day, and I pick because I have 6 periods of English and 1 period of reading workshop, which is for our struggling readers, and you can't possibly do it for 7 classes every single day. So but I kind of rotate. So 1 month I might do first period, and then another month I might do 3rd period, or as I said before, if I'm starting a new unit that I've never taught before, that's when I'll also do it. And sometimes it's a big question. Sometimes I'll look at a particular class based on a couple of kids in that class too, because maybe the other 6th grade teachers, we work really well as a team, and maybe they've noticed things in their classroom and they may or may not use SOAP notes. And so then I can say, oh, you know what, for a few weeks here, I'm going to use SOAP notes in this class because I really want to hone in on those couple of students. Am I seeing the same thing? And again, then as Dr. Weaver mentioned in the beginning, you can see those patterns and start to refer them if they need to go to the counselor, or is this, or is it a me thing? Do I need to change the way, I'm teaching?
Absolutely.
that helps.
I appreciate you saying that. And I know we're over time. But SOAP notes can be used. It doesn't have to be just with social justice. They literally can be used for absolutely any instruction, and just being reflective with your students. And it could be one student, a small group of students, or a whole class of students. But I want to say thank you to all of you and all of your participation. This has been absolutely fabulous. I want to make sure I record everything and copy everything in the chat as well, because there's so much good information over there. So thank you. You're going to leave here and go back to the main room, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right.